Ladies and gentlemen, you might think that making someone obsessed with you is about playing mind games, but let me tell you something fundamental. You cannot truly control another person's emotions, but you can control who you become. Now, the reason reverse psychology works is simple. People crave what they cannot easily have. They desire what seems just beyond their grasp. And when you present yourself as independent, self-sufficient, and just slightly out of reach, you trigger something ancient in the human brain, the drive to pursue, to conquer, to attain what is perceived as valuable. But here's the kicker. You don't fake this. You genuinely become it. If you rely on deception, on manipulative tactics, you will eventually be exposed. People can sense inauthenticity. Instead, your strategy must be to elevate yourself, to become the kind of person that others are naturally drawn to. Now, let's break this down into actionable steps. To understand the true power of influence, one must first grasp the fundamental principle that you cannot force another person to be obsessed with you. Any attempt to do so through sheer manipulation will at best lead to temporary attraction that quickly fades once the illusion is broken. Instead, the real key lies in self-improvement, becoming a person so compelling, so deeply rooted in value and purpose that others naturally gravitate toward you. This is not just about relationships, it's about human psychology at its core. People are drawn to strength, to competence, and to those who possess a clear sense of direction. When you focus on becoming the best version of yourself, you begin to radiate an energy that is inherently attractive. Think about the individuals who command attention when they walk into a room. They are not necessarily the loudest or the most aggressive. Rather, they exude confidence, depth, and a quiet certainty in who they are. This presence is cultivated through a deep commitment to personal growth. It requires intellectual, emotional, and even physical refinement. On an intellectual level, one of the most attractive traits a person can develop is curiosity. People are fascinated by those who have a rich internal world, who think deeply, challenge ideas, and engage with life on a meaningful level. A mind that is constantly learning, questioning, and expanding its horizons is an inherently powerful tool of attraction. The reason for this is simple. People want to be around those who can challenge them, inspire them, and introduce them to new perspectives. A dull, passive, or stagnant mind does not draw attention, it repels it. If you wish to make someone obsessed with you, the first step is to ensure that you are someone worth being obsessed over. But intellectual growth alone is not enough. Emotional mastery plays an equally crucial role. Many people mistakenly believe that attraction is built through superficial gestures or scripted interactions, but real obsession is forged in the realm of emotional intelligence. This means understanding your own emotions, controlling them, and more importantly, influencing the emotional states of those around you. A person who lacks emotional control, who is reactive, needy, or constantly seeking validation, subtly communicates weakness. In contrast, someone who is centered, self-assured, and emotionally resilient signals strength. This is where self-respect comes into play. When you set high standards for yourself, when you refuse to settle for mediocrity in both yourself and others, you command respect. People become drawn to those who respect themselves because self-respect is an indication of intrinsic value. If you are easily swayed by other people's opinions, if you are desperate for approval, you send a message that you do not believe yourself to be worthy. And if you do not believe in your own worth, why should anyone else? Consider how this applies in relationships. If you constantly chase, constantly seek reassurance, or position yourself as overly available, you diminish your value. Not because playing hard to get is a magic trick, but because behavior communicates psychology. If you prioritize yourself, if you have a mission, if you're not waiting around for someone else to validate you, you send a powerful message. I am valuable with or without you. That is the energy that makes people chase. There is also a physical component to this. While attraction is not solely dependent on appearance, the way you present yourself speaks volumes about your self-respect and discipline. A well-kept, physically fit individual communicates dedication, self-care, and ambition. It is not about looking a certain way to please others. It is about the discipline required to maintain a strong and healthy body. This discipline extends into all aspects of life, creating a natural aura of authority and magnetism. All of these factors, intellectual curiosity, emotional resilience, self-respect, and physical discipline, culminate in what we call presence. Presence is the ability to command attention without demanding it. It is what happens when you walk into a room and people instinctively sense that you are someone of importance. even if they cannot immediately articulate why. Presence is built through years of commitment to personal excellence. It cannot be faked, and it cannot be manufactured overnight. Once you understand this, the entire game of attraction changes. You stop focusing on trying to make someone obsessed with you through manipulation, and instead, you focus on becoming someone whose presence is naturally addictive. The irony is that the more you focus on yourself, on your growth, your purpose, your mission, the more people will be drawn to you. And the moment you stop chasing, stop seeking external validation, and instead fully step into your own power, you will find that obsession does not need to be manufactured, it simply happens. Value in any domain of life is dictated by scarcity. The rarer something is, the more people desire it. This is a fundamental principle of economics, psychology, and human relationships. People do not obsess over what is always available, predictable, and easily obtained. Instead, they fixate on that which seems just out of reach, that which offers challenge, and that which demands effort. This principle applies universally, from material possessions to social dynamics to romantic relationships. If you make yourself too available, too predictable, or too eager to please, you devalue yourself in the eyes of others. Think about how luxury brands operate. They do not flood the market with their products. Instead, they create an illusion of exclusivity. Limited editions, long wait lists, and high price points all serve a psychological function. They signal that the product is rare and therefore valuable. People are not simply purchasing an item. They are engaging in a pursuit. They are proving their worth by gaining access to something that not everyone can have. The same psychological principle applies in relationships. The moment you make yourself overly accessible, always available, always responsive, always seeking validation, you remove the element of challenge. You become an open book, a predictable presence, and ultimately someone who is taken for granted rather than desired. Human nature is wired to pursue that which seems slightly out of reach. This is why people often become more interested in those who appear busy, focused, and engaged in their own pursuits. There is an air of mystery in someone who is not immediately accessible, someone who does not revolve their world around another person. That mystery creates curiosity, and curiosity fuels obsession. If you give someone everything they want immediately, they may appreciate it at first, but over time, the excitement fades. Why? Because there is no challenge, no sense of earning something valuable. Consider the concept of intermittent reinforcement, a well-documented psychological phenomenon. This principle explains why gambling is so addictive. When a person does not know when they will be rewarded, they become more engaged, more emotionally invested. Slot machines operate on this very principle. You do not win every time, but the uncertainty of the next win keeps you hooked. The same dynamic applies in relationships. If you are always available, always saying yes, always providing immediate attention and validation, you remove the unpredictability that makes people emotionally invested. However, if you maintain an element of distance, if your attention is something that must be earned, the emotional stakes increase. The other person begins to value your presence more because they cannot predict it, and as a result, they start to crave it. Now, scarcity does not mean being distant for the sake of manipulation. The goal is not to play mind games or to withhold affection in an artificial manner. Instead, the idea is to cultivate a life so rich and meaningful that your time and energy naturally become scarce. People who are on a mission, who are driven by purpose, who have their own ambitions, naturally project scarcity. They are not sitting around waiting for attention. They are engaged in their own pursuits. This, in turn, makes them more desirable. They are not positioning themselves as a commodity that is freely available at all times, but rather as a prize that must be earned. Think about the relationships in which you have felt the strongest emotions. Chances are, those emotions were not built in situations where everything was given to you easily. Instead, they likely formed in situations where there was a degree of uncertainty, a feeling of having to prove yourself, a sense that the other person had options and that their attention was something valuable. This is the essence of the scarcity principle in relationships. When attention and affection are given too freely, they lose their meaning. When they must be earned, they become infinitely more valuable. This is why self-respect plays such a crucial role in attraction. If you do not value your own time, why should anyone else? If you are always available, always waiting, always seeking approval, you are signaling that your time and presence are not particularly valuable. On the other hand, if you are selective about where you invest your attention, if you prioritize your own goals and personal development, you naturally create an aura of scarcity. You send the message that your time is precious, that your energy is not something to be given away freely, and that being close to you is a privilege rather than an entitlement. The power of scarcity extends beyond just initial attraction. It is also what keeps long-term relationships exciting. Many relationships lose their intensity because they fall into the trap of routine and predictability. There is no longer a sense of pursuit, no sense of discovery, no element of unpredictability. The relationship becomes something that is simply there rather than something that feels like an ongoing journey. This is why maintaining individuality, personal ambition, and a sense of purpose outside of the relationship is so important. When both individuals continue to grow and evolve independently, the relationship retains its dynamic energy. The sense of scarcity remains intact because each person recognizes that the other has their own life, their own passions, and their own value outside of the relationship itself. Ultimately, the scarcity principle is not about manipulation. It is about understanding human nature. People do not value what is handed to them on a silver platter. They value what they must work for, what they must earn, and what feels rare. If you want someone to become obsessed with you, the key is not to give them everything they want instantly. Instead, it is to become someone whose time, attention, and presence are inherently valuable. When you achieve that, you no longer have to chase. People will be drawn to you naturally, not because you played a game, but because you became someone worth pursuing. Every interaction between two people involves an unspoken battle for control over the frame of reality. The person who dictates the emotional tone, the expectations, and the pace of the conversation is the one who ultimately holds power. This is not about dominance in the aggressive sense, but rather about the ability to shape the way others perceive and respond to you. If you allow yourself to be overly reactive, constantly adjusting your emotions and behaviors based on the moods and whims of another person, you relinquish control. But if you master the ability to set the emotional tone and establish yourself as the center of stability, you create an irresistible gravitational pull that makes others naturally follow your lead. Human beings are wired to seek certainty. In a world of constant change, uncertainty, and emotional chaos, people instinctively gravitate toward those who exhibit composure, confidence, and stability. This is why leaders are admired, why certain people command respect without effort, and why some individuals seem to have an almost magnetic effect on others. They are not controlled by the environment, they shape it. They do not seek validation from others, they create an aura that makes others seek validation from them. One of the most powerful ways to control the frame in any relationship is to develop a deep sense of self-assurance. Many people enter relationships or social interactions with the unconscious belief that they must prove their worth, that they must say or do the right things to gain approval. This mindset places them in a subordinate position from the very beginning. When you operate from a place of needing to be liked, you automatically concede control of the frame to the other person. They become the one who decides your value, and you in turn become emotionally dependent on their perception of you. But what happens when you shift your mindset? What happens when you enter interactions with the understanding that your value is already established, that your worth is not up for debate? You instantly alter the power dynamic. Instead of trying to fit into someone else's reality, you create your own. And by doing so, you compel others to step into it. This is why truly self-assured individuals do not chase, do not beg for attention, and do not feel the need to prove themselves. Their reality is already solid, and as a result, people naturally align with them. There is also a psychological element at play here. The person who remains emotionally steady in any given situation is the one who dictates the energy of that interaction. If you find yourself reacting too quickly, mirroring the emotions of others without thought, or constantly adjusting your behavior based on external validation, you are surrendering control. But if you maintain a calm, composed presence, regardless of what is happening around you, you send a powerful message. I am not easily influenced. I am centered in my own reality. This concept applies not only in personal relationships, but also in professional and social settings. In a negotiation, for example, the person who maintains composure, who does not immediately react, and who allows moments of silence to create tension is the one who holds power. The same principle applies in dating and attraction. The person who is less reactive, who is not desperate for approval, and who is willing to walk away at any moment creates a sense of value. People want what they perceive as valuable, and value is determined by the level of certainty and self-respect a person demonstrates. Consider the difference between someone who constantly seeks reassurance and someone who simply assumes that they are valuable. The first person asks, "Do you like me?" The second person assumes, "Of course I am liked." The first person waits anxiously for a text, overanalyzes responses, and adjusts their behavior to maintain interest. The second person moves through life with the understanding that their time and attention are valuable, and as a result, they do not wait around for anyone. They continue forward with purpose. And this very act of forward momentum makes them more attractive. This is not arrogance. It is a deep understanding of social dynamics. When you control the frame, you are not bending over backward to accommodate others. Instead, you are establishing the reality in which interactions take place. You set the tone, the pace, and the emotional energy. People do not consciously realize this, but they are constantly influenced by those who exude confidence and certainty. To truly master this, you must first become emotionally self-sufficient. If your happiness, your self-worth, or your sense of identity is tied to how another person perceives you, you will always be at their mercy. But when you develop internal stability, when you no longer need external validation to feel whole, you become the one who sets the emotional tone, and in doing so, you make yourself someone others look to for direction, for emotional grounding, and ultimately for connection. When you understand that controlling the frame is not about manipulation, but about self-mastery, you begin to see relationships differently. You stop chasing approval, stop fearing rejection, and instead focus on becoming the person who naturally dictates the emotional environment. And when you achieve this level of presence and certainty, people do not just want to be around you, they feel compelled to be. People are not drawn to what they already fully understand. The human mind is wired to seek out novelty, to be intrigued by the unknown, and to pursue that which remains slightly beyond reach. Predictability can provide comfort, but it does not inspire fascination. When everything about a person is laid out immediately, when there is no depth, no layers to uncover, and no sense of discovery, the interaction quickly loses its appeal. This is why mystery is such a powerful psychological force in attraction. It is the reason why certain people remain unforgettable, why some relationships feel intoxicating, and why others fade into obscurity. At the core of mystery lies the concept of selective revelation. To be mysterious does not mean to be secretive in a way that is evasive or dishonest, but rather to allow aspects of yourself to unfold naturally over time. Many people make the mistake of oversharing in an attempt to connect. They believe that by revealing everything about themselves quickly, they will create intimacy. But in reality, this often has the opposite effect. When there is nothing left to discover, the sense of intrigue disappears. The more someone must work to understand you, the more invested they become. The reason for this is rooted in psychology. People value what they earn. When something is easily given, it is often taken for granted. But when information, attention, and emotional depth are revealed gradually, they become significantly more meaningful. This is why a book that reveals its entire plot in the first chapter loses its reader's engagement, while a book that slowly unravels its layers keeps people turning the pages. Relationships operate in a similar way. When someone feels that they are continually uncovering new aspects of your personality, they remain engaged. They become emotionally invested in the process of discovery. There is also a strong biological component to this. The brain releases dopamine in response to uncertainty and anticipation. This is why people become obsessed with puzzles, with games, and with stories that leave them questioning. When everything is too clear-cut, too obvious, the brain loses interest. But when there is an element of the unknown, when there is always something left to figure out, the brain remains engaged. This is why relationships that have an element of unpredictability often feel more intense. It is not about playing games, but about allowing the natural process of discovery to unfold over time. One of the most effective ways to cultivate mystery is through maintaining an independent and multifaceted life. When your entire identity revolves around another person, when you are always available, and when your world becomes predictable, there is nothing left to explore. But when you have passions, interests, and a life that exists outside of any one relationship, you naturally become more intriguing. People are drawn to those who have depth, who have experiences that are not immediately accessible, and who carry an air of quiet confidence that suggests there is always more beneath the surface. Think about the individuals who leave a lasting impact. They are not the ones who lay everything bare at once. They are the ones who have a quiet intensity about them, who reveal themselves in layers, and who always seem to possess a deeper well of experience, thought, and emotion than what is immediately visible. This is the power of mystery. It keeps people engaged, it makes interactions feel dynamic, and it creates a sense of emotional investment that cannot be easily replicated. Another key aspect of maintaining mystery is understanding the power of presence and absence. Constant availability diminishes value. When someone is always there, always accessible, and always responding immediately, their presence becomes expected rather than desired. But when there is a balance between connection and distance, when your presence is something that is earned rather than assumed, it creates a sense of anticipation. Absence, when used correctly, makes presence more meaningful. It gives people time to reflect, to wonder, and to miss your presence. However, mystery is not just about what you withhold, it is also about what you choose to express. A truly intriguing person is not silent or distant, but rather someone who communicates in a way that invites curiosity. They share thoughts and ideas that leave space for interpretation. They ask questions that provoke deeper conversation, and they reveal just enough to spark interest without providing immediate resolution. This is why some of the most engaging conversations are the ones that end with a sense of wanting more. In relationships, mystery also plays a crucial role in sustaining long-term attraction. Many couples fall into the trap of total predictability, where every interaction becomes routine, every conversation follows the same patterns, and there is no longer a sense of discovery. But when both individuals continue to evolve, to pursue personal growth, and to cultivate new experiences, the relationship retains its sense of excitement. There is always something new to learn, always a new layer to uncover, and always a sense that the other person is not fully known. Ultimately, mystery is not about deception or manipulation. It is about understanding the way human psychology responds to intrigue. People do not become obsessed with what is fully understood. They become obsessed with what keeps them engaged, what challenges them to think, and what leaves them wanting more. By embracing the power of mystery, by allowing aspects of yourself to unfold naturally over time, and by cultivating a life that is rich, independent, and ever-evolving, you create an emotional dynamic that is impossible to ignore. Attraction is not a static force. It is dynamic, ever-changing, and deeply influenced by the psychological triggers embedded within human nature. One of the most powerful forces that drive people to desire, chase, and become emotionally invested is the concept of uncertainty. Human beings are wired to respond to unpredictability. When something is predictable, it becomes routine, expected, and eventually taken for granted. But when something is uncertain, when there is an element of unpredictability, it commands attention, engages emotions, and creates a deep sense of psychological investment. This principle is most clearly demonstrated in the concept of intermittent reinforcement, a powerful behavioral mechanism observed in both animals and humans. In psychology, intermittent reinforcement refers to the idea that behaviors are strengthened when rewards are given unpredictably rather than consistently. It is the same principle that keeps people addicted to gambling. A slot machine does not reward the player every time they pull the lever. Instead, it delivers rewards at unpredictable intervals, creating a cycle of anticipation and emotional engagement. The brain becomes hooked, always seeking the next reward, never knowing when it will come, but remaining deeply invested in the process. This is precisely how uncertainty works in attraction. When a person knows exactly when they will receive attention, validation, or affection, their brain no longer finds it exciting. But when these rewards are delivered inconsistently, sometimes given freely, sometimes withheld, the emotional stakes increase. The mind becomes hyper-focused on the source of that validation, trying to predict when it will come next. This is why people tend to desire what they cannot fully have, why emotions intensify when there is an element of unpredictability, and why individuals often become fixated on those who create an aura of uncertainty. One of the most effective ways to leverage this principle in relationships is through varying the way you express attention and affection. If you are always available, always responsive, and always predictable, you become emotionally safe. But you also risk becoming emotionally dull. There is no challenge, no sense of excitement, and no reason for the other person to become deeply invested. However, when your attention is given selectively, when some moments are intensely engaging while others create distance, you introduce an element of unpredictability that makes your presence feel more valuable. It is important to understand that this is not about manipulation or playing games. It is about aligning with natural human psychology. If you reflect on your own experiences, you will likely notice that you have been most drawn to people who were not entirely predictable. Perhaps they would text you eagerly one day, then be unavailable the next. Perhaps they showed deep interest in a conversation, then suddenly became slightly distant. This inconsistency keeps the mind engaged because it introduces an element of challenge. The brain perceives it as something that must be figured out, something that requires effort to maintain. That effort, in turn, creates emotional investment. This is why people often find themselves obsessing over relationships that contain elements of uncertainty. The emotional highs and lows create a psychological roller coaster that makes the experience feel intense, meaningful, and addictive. When the brain experiences a reward after a period of uncertainty, it releases a surge of dopamine, reinforcing the desire to seek that reward again. This is why individuals often become more emotionally attached to relationships that contain fluctuations in attention and affection than to those that are consistently stable. However, there is a delicate balance to maintain. If uncertainty is taken to an extreme, if someone feels constantly neglected, ignored, or unimportant, it can create frustration and resentment rather than attraction. The goal is not to be distant or unresponsive for the sake of creating longing, but rather to introduce a natural rhythm to the way you interact. Some days you are fully present, engaged, and emotionally generous. Other days you are occupied with your own life, your own interests, and your own priorities. This balance ensures that your attention remains valuable rather than expected. Another way uncertainty plays a role in attraction is through maintaining a sense of personal autonomy. People are most drawn to those who have a life outside of them, those who are not constantly seeking validation or needing reassurance. When someone senses that you are independent, that your happiness does not depend entirely on their attention, they naturally feel a stronger pull toward you. Why? Because they recognize that they do not have total control over your emotions. They cannot predict when they will receive your full attention, and this unpredictability makes them want it even more. This principle applies not only in romantic relationships, but also in social dynamics and professional settings. Leaders, for example, command respect and admiration not by being overly accessible, but by maintaining an air of unpredictability. They do not respond to every request immediately. They make others wait, creating a sense of anticipation. This is the same dynamic that makes celebrities, influencers, and public figures so desirable. Their attention is not freely available, which makes people crave it even more. In relationships, uncertainty fuels passion. When everything is known and predictable, excitement fades. But when there is a sense of anticipation, when there is a slight edge of unpredictability, emotions remain heightened. This is why relationships that begin with an element of challenge, where one person is not immediately won over, where there is an initial resistance, often feel more exhilarating. The effort required to gain someone's attention makes the reward of their affection feel infinitely more valuable. Ultimately, the power of uncertainty is not about deception. It is about understanding the way human attraction operates. People do not become obsessed with what is easily obtained. They become obsessed with what is intriguing, what requires effort, and what keeps them emotionally engaged. By introducing a natural rhythm of unpredictability into your interactions, by maintaining a sense of independence, and by ensuring that your attention remains valuable rather than expected, you create an emotional dynamic that fosters deep, lasting attraction. Emotional detachment is one of the most powerful psychological tools a person can develop, not just in relationships, but in life as a whole. When you are emotionally dependent on someone's approval, affection, or attention, you give them control over your state of mind. You become reactive instead of proactive. You allow your emotions to be dictated by their actions, their words, and their level of interest in you. This dynamic places you in a vulnerable position, making you easy to manipulate, easy to take for granted, and ultimately easy to lose. But when you cultivate emotional detachment, when you learn to maintain control over your own emotional state, regardless of external factors, you instantly become more powerful, more attractive, and more respected. This does not mean becoming cold, indifferent, or incapable of deep emotional connection. Quite the opposite. True emotional detachment is not about refusing to feel. It is about refusing to be controlled by feelings that arise in response to another person's behavior. It is about developing a strong sense of self that remains intact whether someone is present or absent, interested or indifferent, affectionate or distant. When you master this ability, you become someone who is naturally magnetic. Others are drawn to you, not because you are chasing them, but because you exude an unshakable sense of confidence and stability. The core of emotional detachment is understanding that you do not need any single person to feel complete. This is a difficult concept for many to accept, especially in the context of relationships. Society conditions people to believe that love is about dependency, that romance is about needing someone so intensely that life feels empty without them. But this kind of emotional reliance is not love, it is attachment. And attachment breeds fear. Fear of losing someone, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. Fear, in turn, leads to behaviors that diminish attraction, clinginess, insecurity, neediness, and a willingness to tolerate mistreatment simply to avoid being left behind. When you detach emotionally, you remove fear from the equation. You enter relationships from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. You understand that your life is full and meaningful on its own, and that anyone who enters it is a complement rather than a necessity. This mindset fundamentally changes the way people perceive you. Instead of being seen as someone who is desperate for love, you are seen as someone who is selective about who you allow into your life. And selection implies value. People naturally respect and admire those who do not seek validation. When you are emotionally detached, you do not overanalyze every message, every action, or every shift in someone's mood. You do not allow yourself to be consumed by worry about what another person is thinking. Instead, you focus on yourself, on your goals, your passions, and your personal growth. Ironically, it is this very attitude that makes people more drawn to you. When someone senses that they do not have full control over your emotions, they become more invested in earning your attention. Emotional detachment also grants you the ability to set and enforce boundaries. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear that enforcing them will push others away. They tolerate disrespect, accept inconsistent behavior, and suppress their own needs in the hope of maintaining a connection. But the reality is that people respect what they cannot easily manipulate. When you are emotionally detached, you are willing to walk away from situations that do not align with your standards. You do not tolerate mistreatment because you are not dependent on any single relationship for your happiness. This willingness to walk away is one of the most powerful traits a person can possess. It signals high value. It communicates that you are not someone who can be taken for granted. In relationships, emotional detachment creates an air of mystery and intrigue. When someone knows that you are not completely emotionally invested, they begin to wonder about you. They question what you are thinking, what you are feeling, and what they must do to earn more of your attention. This uncertainty fuels attraction. The moment someone feels that they have completely figured you out, the excitement diminishes. But when they sense that you maintain a level of independence, that your emotions are not entirely dictated by their presence, they become more invested in trying to win you over. This principle extends beyond romantic relationships. In social and professional settings, those who are emotionally detached tend to command more respect. They do not overreact to criticism. They do not seek approval from everyone around them, and they do not allow external circumstances to dictate their mood. This creates an aura of confidence that naturally draws people in. Others recognize that this is a person who cannot be easily swayed, who operates from a place of inner strength rather than external validation. One of the best ways to cultivate emotional detachment is by developing a strong sense of purpose. When you are deeply engaged in your own goals, ambitions, and personal development, you do not have time to obsess over another person's level of interest in you. Your mind is occupied with growth, with progress, with things that genuinely fulfill you. This naturally shifts the power dynamic in your relationships. You become the one who is pursued rather than the one doing the pursuing. Others sense that your world does not revolve around them, and this makes them want to be a bigger part of it. Another important aspect of emotional detachment is learning to control your reactions. Many people give away their power by reacting emotionally to every slight shift in someone's behavior. If a person pulls away, they panic. If someone ignores a message, they spiral into self-doubt. But when you are emotionally detached, you do not react impulsively. You remain composed. You understand that emotions are temporary and that no single interaction defines your worth. This self-restraint is incredibly attractive. It signals that you are not easily influenced, that you are secure within yourself, and that you do not operate from a place of desperation. Ultimately, emotional detachment is about reclaiming control over your own mind. It is about recognizing that your happiness, your self-worth, and your sense of fulfillment do not depend on any external source. When you adopt this mindset, you stop fearing loss, you stop tolerating disrespect, and you stop chasing after people who do not fully appreciate you. And paradoxically, it is this very detachment that makes you more desirable, more respected, and more sought after. When you no longer need someone, they begin to feel a stronger need for you. Attraction, obsession, and deep emotional investment are not created through desperation, overexposure, or constant validation. They are the result of psychological mastery. When you understand the principles of reverse psychology, you shift from chasing attention to commanding it. The key is to cultivate an aura of mystery, introduce elements of uncertainty, and most importantly, develop emotional detachment. When you are no longer driven by the need for approval, when your presence is not taken for granted, and when you maintain a strong sense of independence, you naturally become more intriguing, more respected, and more desired. The human mind is wired to crave what it cannot fully have. The moment you become predictable, completely available, or overly eager, you diminish your perceived value. But when you remain slightly out of reach, when your emotions, attention, and affection are given selectively rather than freely, you create an irresistible pull. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding human nature and using it to your advantage. The most powerful thing you can do is cultivate a life that is fulfilling on its own. When your happiness does not depend on another person's validation, you become someone others are naturally drawn to. You exude confidence, self-respect, and an air of quiet mystery that sparks curiosity and emotional investment. And it is this dynamic that makes people not just interested in you, but truly obsessed.